Alright everyone, welcome back to another Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes video with Fat Phil, and in this video, we're going to be answering a viewer question from Shade Aquatic Breeder. And they asked, will I ever be good if I never farm First Order Resistance, or Inquisitors? And this is a great question, because it brings up kind of a topic that I've been kind of toying with a little bit, so shout out Shade Aquatic Breeder, going to be answering your question. Probably going to be starting a new series with this because it's not quite FAQ. We're going to do a whole video on this. So if I find a question in the comments that I really like, I'm going to make a video about it and I'm going to give you guys a shout out in the video. So let's dive into our topic. Before we do though, I do want to give a shout out to my channel members listed right here. Thank you guys so much for your support. If you are interested, channel memberships, there is a link in the video description down below. Make sure you guys check that out. They, shameless plug here, right? Channel members get priority roster reviews during streams. They're going to get, priority chats. And there's also a special section of the Discord where only they have access to. So, shameless plug there for channel memberships. Let's dive into our video and talk about will you ever be good? So, Shade, there's kind of two ways to answer this question. And there's a lot to unpack here. So, there's the objective way and there's the subjective way to answer your question. To explain what I mean by objective and subjective, I want to go back to when I was in college, right? And I ran cross country and track. I don't know if you guys are going to be able to read the shirt, but I ran cross country and track from middle school all through college. And what, I would have said myself, right, that I was a mediocre runner, right? That's what I would have called myself, that I was mediocre. Because I was putting that, I wasn't being objective, I was being subjective and saying, well, only comparing myself to people who run, I'm more mediocre. Now, people who, like my family members, relatives, friends in high school would have said I was a very good runner because they're comparing me to the whole world and saying, well, there's all these people who don't run. Yeah, Phil's really, really good. So they were being objective. And that's okay, right? That's the same way you have to be in this game, right? You've got to be able to do both, right? Both are going to be important. So here's what I mean. We'll start with my roster here. If I was being subjective, I would say that this account is not that good because I'm going to be comparing it to the likes of the top end accounts, right? If I'm comparing to the top end accounts, right? If I'm comparing to the top end accounts, right, I'm being subjective. I'm saying, well, I'm only going to compare it to the best of the best. No, it's not really that good, right? I'm putting some context, I'm putting some, stipulations there that I'm not going to compare my account to anything below it, right? I'm just going to say, well, compared to people around me or above me, this isn't as good. On the flip side, if I was being objective, I would say, yeah, this is a pretty good account. I'm in Kyber 2, right? The vast majority of the player base is below me in Kyber, has a smaller account, or there's not as good of mods, whatever. Objectively, yes, this is a better account than I probably give it credit subjectively for. So that's how you would say objectively and subjectively that I use them. But I think with subjective, you're kind of not going to compare yourself to anything lower, right? Like Tom Brady does not compare himself to Baker Mayfield, right? That's not what Tom Brady does. Tom Brady doesn't have anybody to compare himself to, being honest. But they don't look at them and they're like, oh, well, compared to that high school athlete, I'm doing pretty good. They're only looking at the greatest of the greatest to say who they're comparing themselves to. They're being subjective, right? So that's what I mean by that, right? The subjective objective. But there's a second part here that's the problem with Galaxy of Heroes. And that has to do with money. You see, if you spend money, right, you come in here, you buy packs, right? You can buy an advantage in this game. You absolutely can buy an advantage in this game. That you can grow your account through the use of money. Because this game isn't all based on skill. It's also based on what you have, right? And a perfect example here, we're just going to go into my squad arena and we're going to compare myself to one of the guys I know who has a crazy, stupid amount of stuff. We'll go to Darkside this time. So Darkside has 10.5 million galactic power, right? Got their GLs, Reva, some good relic levels in here. I don't know if Darkside spent money. I'm not making any assumptions. But this, let's say he spent, for the sake of argument, let's say Darkside has spent money. If I go up and face this person in GAC, I'm probably going to lose. They have a huge advantage in galactic power. They've got a huge advantage in characters, and they've paid to get there, which is the whole model of this game, and that's right. That's correct. There should be an advantage to paying in this game. I want to be very clear on that. So my, where I kind of sit here, right, and I say this is because you can't always be subjective without also applying that context of skill, right? You can have a very good account and not be a skilled player, and you can be a very skilled player with a horrible account. One of the content creators I really enjoy a lot is, I don't know if I mentioned him a time or two here, but Xaereth. So if you guys go check out Xaereth Prevails, I'll plug his channel here. Xaereth has a whale account that he whales on. Then he has his mid-level account, which it's basically the same galactic power as mine. Has significantly fewer galactic legends than me, but has a lot of the off-meta stuff to do stuff to get work done. And then he's even got a smaller account. And it's really good to see him kind of play a GAC with a mediocre account. And at times he'll just lose because he can't compete with someone with a crazy roster. Think as good as, another creator like AP Gains could be at GAC. If AP Gains comes up against my roster, the advantage I have is almost insurmountable for him. That I'm going to be able to combine both my roster size and my skill to be able to beat someone like him. And that's not a dig at him whatsoever. He hasn't been playing as long, right? Me going up against Calvin Awesome or Sanjita, I'm going to get my clock cleaned by them because they just have a larger account. Regardless of how skillful I am, you might not be able to overcome that hurdle of roster size. And that's the problem, Shade Aquatic Breeder, to kind of go back to your question, that will you ever be good? Well, it depends on what you're thinking is good. If you're talking about your roster, subjectively, you could have a good roster if you don't have those, right? You're oh, wow, you don't have those two things, but everything else is really good. But from an objective standpoint, no. But then there's also the, are you skilled, right? Are you a good enough skill-wise that you can get things done? And that's the bigger question. I don't think this game there's no easy answers anymore, especially because of the model, right? We don't all start on an even playing field. Mods are random. The amount of slot machines, RNG, this change, that change, they crit, you didn't, dodge. There's so many variables in this game that almost take a lot of skill out of the equation in certain situations, or that require a significantly more skill than your opponent to get a better result, right? So I think it's really difficult to have these discussions of, what's good, because it's all relative is a better word, right? It's all relative. From a subjective standpoint, you're not really good until you're in that end game. You've got all the stuff, right? That's just the way a lot of those guys would look, right? But if you look objectively and you get to 9 million galactic power, you're probably towards the tail end of the game as far as most people are concerned. So yeah, you have a very good account. So that's kind of my viewer thoughts, guys. I don't, if you're answering his viewer question, I think it was a really good question and kind of thought-provoking, and I thought it'd be a good video for you guys to kind of think about, right? I mean, if you think about your Galactic Legends for a second, right? If you miss out on your First Order and Rey, and then, just those two, you're missing out on fleets, you're missing out on some good squads, you're missing out on 2 Galactic Legends. There's a lot of stuff to unpack there. With Inquisitors, I mean, you're missing out on Reva, who's basically a Galactic Legend. But then, you're missing out on the Scythe. You're missing out on TIE Interceptor. there's a couple of... There's some really big things that you're missing out on if you don't go for those factions. And I can understand why somebody would say, well, I don't want to go for those factions. I get they're from the least popular movies, and, the Inquisitors made everybody upset in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. I get it. But, I think that kind of answers the, hopefully it answers the question, right? That sure, you can, objectively, your roster's not going to be as good, but subjectively, you apply some context to it, or subjectively, no, you won't be good. But objectively, you can kind of say, yeah, you know what? You get to that point where, yeah, you've got a bunch of stuff. You're going to be better than some people. But you throw skill into the equation, and that's where the answer becomes of, are you really good or not? So that's my thoughts, guys. It's kind of late. Probably rambled a little bit too much, but Let me know what your thoughts are. As always, I love all you guys. May the force be with you, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.